Welcome. We have lots of people coming in still. I'm really happy to have everyone who's here having joined. Um, Brian, it's up to you to kick off. You get to decide exactly how long we wait before we start.
I think we're at the 2 minute mark. As I start talking, people will continue to trickle in, but let's go ahead and get going. And I think in our prep call, Manoush called it right. Let's make sure we end 10 minutes early so people get a longer, more extensive break as well. Thanks everybody for joining us. Very glad to be here. I'm Brian Elliott. I'm the CEO of an outfit called Work Forward. I'm also a executive in residence with Charter, the Future of Work Media and Insights outfit. And we're here today to talk about taking breaks in our workday and why we don't really do it very well. I'm going to pop around to our other panelists just to sort of spur the conversation, let everybody introduce themselves. Melissa, why don't you go ahead and go first?
Happy to. So, Melissa Painter, I'm the founder of Breakthru, which is a way to take breaks in the flow of your work or school day. But my background is as an experienced designer and product inventor, really thinking about the relationship between our bodies and our technology and how movement impacts the way we learn, the way we think, and how we stay healthy. Manoush?
I'm Manoush Zomorodi. I'm a journalist, mostly in public media for the last 30 years. I host NPR's TED Radio Hour, and I'm also author of the book Body Electric, which, thanks, Melissa, which is all about a 20,000 person, yay, Brian, Amy, it's okay. Which was all about a 20,000 clinical trial that we did with regular people who tried to get movement breaks into their days and the sort of extraordinary effects that we saw. And our study is being published on Tuesday. And the book goes into detail about how they made it happen. Amy.
Thank you, Manoush. I'm Amy Marlow, and I am the global lead for employee well-being at MetLife. We have about 40,000 employees around the globe, and my job is around the strategy and the messaging for support of well-being of all of those folks.
Which means she has the hardest job on the call. Let's just be clear.
I don't know
Let's
about
say,
that.
let's just face up to it. Amy is our hero in this particular call.
Thank you very much.
Manoush, congratulations first on getting the study peer reviewed and published. That's awesome. I know how much work that is and how hard that is and how long it takes to get there. Second, I would just note for everybody on the call, I don't know about everybody else, but I'm sitting here thinking about my posture. Um, because as we talk about breaks and movement, it's like you become more conscious of your body. And maybe, Manoush, that's a good place to start. You all studied 20,000 people. You did all kinds of experiments. What's the science telling you about what happens when we sit here, like we are all doing today, in front of cameras and desktops and laptops for
Yeah, so
extended periods?
that was the question I had because to me, it all started, of course, with a personal question, which was like, why do I feel so awful all the time? And I would end the day, close my laptop, and feel like I had like this much energy left, like just enough to crawl over to the couch to scroll on my phone, and maybe watch some Netflix. And I was like, this is ridiculous. What is actually happening? And I think, we've all heard about the mental health effects of being online too much, social media, screen time. But to me, this felt so physical, and I realized how little I knew about what was going on in my body, and I wanted to understand it better. So I heard about a physiologist at Columbia University Medical Center named Keith Diaz, and Keith had been trying to figure out, it's kind of a sad thing. His mission is to figure out what is the tiniest amount of movement that the human body needs so that all the sitting that we do in the modern era doesn't actually lead us to an early grave. And he had found out that 5 minutes of gentle movement for every half hour of sedentary stretches had these outsize effects. It cut people's glucose in half, it dropped their blood pressure precipitously, but it also it improved their focus, their positivity, and also their productivity, which I thought was really interesting. So he was the guy I contacted, and the first thing I said was, why? And he said, well, there's numerous reasons, but let's start with thinking about your legs and your torso, kind of like a garden hose. So when you kink a garden hose, right, that's kind of what you're doing to your legs and your torso. And as you know, if there's water trying to get through a garden hose, it starts to get backed up. and pressure starts to build. And that is exactly what happens with your blood flow. And in that case, the glucose and oxygen can't get from your blood into your muscles and then pushed up to your brain. Therefore, you get raised levels of sugar, you get raised levels of blood pressure, you get less oxygen and glucose to your brain. And so not only is that bad, for chronic health conditions like diabetes, obesity, etc., it also explains why we get that foggy, exhausted feeling, because we literally are not feeding our brain. So that was just, I was like, that makes total sense. It's not, it's not some big mystery. It's actually very basic science. So why aren't we talking about this more?
Great and huge insights. Amy, something drove you to start looking at this from MetLife's perspective. What got you guys here and focused on this as an area of concern?
So it kind of dates back to the pandemic, really, which really fundamentally changed the workday for so many people. I've been working from home for many years, but when everyone started doing it, I think without commutes and without outside, interruptions, people really found that the pace of work got faster and they were sitting at their desks for longer periods of time because there was just less reason to get up. And so around then is when we really started thinking about how we support our employees during the flow of work, not just with employee benefits and wellness programs, which we've always done and which we continue to do. But how can we help our employees manage their energy and focus during the day? As Manoush just pointed out, the cognitive impact of sitting all those hours, we really wanted to counteract that. So we really thought that helping our people to just take more short breaks, I mean, it's not rocket science. There are barriers, but we felt like it was kind of a great, simple thing we could all rally around.
We're definitely going to come back to how you sold that one in and how you got people using it, because I think that's what we're all actually really interested in. But Melissa, before we go further, like what have you learned? Because you've also studied the sort of cognitive impacts of all of this too. What have you seen?
I think for me, on the science front, all of the health components and productivity components that were just touched on are really, incredibly basic, urgent, and it's actually a global health crisis, just to say. I mean, we swim in this data all the time. This is impacting so many people around the world in a way that's so preventable. It's really a story that needs to be told. From my personal vantage point, I obsess on something else. I obsess on how does movement impact creativity?
Mhm.
How does movement impact our sense of self? How does movement impact how we learn as children? I spend a lot of time talking to expert movers, creative movers, athletes, et cetera, adventure movers, and they have a sense of embodied knowledge that's very special and a big part of being human. And so I think about how do we translate that to a broader audience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I came at this through my experience and my team's experience at Slack during the pandemic. Slack itself shifted from being a in-office culture and company to being, everybody remote, at least during the pandemic. And one of the things that we found, like in the summer and fall of 2020, even was that people were really getting fried with the number of meetings, the number of days spent sitting in front of, Zoom calls. And part of that was just an overabundance of meetings and check-ins and everything else, which we tried to address. But the other was just like, I am sitting here for so long. It is hurting. It is creating, an amount of cognitive fry on me as well as just physical pain. And we started experimenting with things, right? Like with teams being able to sit there and say, hey, how do you want to take your one-on-one with me? Can we do a walk and talk, like a virtual walk and talk where I'm on the phone, you're on the phone, and we're walking around someplace? I'll go out in the backyard and trim the rose bush. And there's just different ways of like at least breaking things up that were a starting point. And we'll come back to all of that. But love to hear from all of you. Like let's just all chime in a little bit on this. What's the broader set in terms of other things you've seen around science that you wish everybody knew behind why this matters?
My one's fast. I think it's the fact that it burns mental energy to sit still, which is not what they tell us when we're, 2 years old, 3 years old, 5 years old, second graders. Sit still to think hard, and that's just a myth. Uh, Manoush, what about you?
Yeah, I think mine's related. So I think when I talk to regular people and you explain to them like the reason why you can't think hard when you're sitting for too long is literally because CO2 is building up in your brain and that's what is making you feel foggy. They're like, oh, it's like chemistry. I'm like, yeah, exactly. But the other thing that I researched for the book was this relatively new area called interoception, which is the body brain conversation, the body telling the brain, take off your sweater. It's too hot in here. You need to go to the bathroom. You need to have a snack, whatever else. And this idea that, we're so busy, captivated by what's going on our screens that we lose touch with our embodied intelligence. And I can't tell you how many times I've been like, oh, my left foot is asleep. How did I not even notice that? Or I look up and it's been 3 hours. But what we saw in our study was that over the span of a few weeks, people started using timers to make sure that they took their breaks. But by the end, they felt like many people said, I don't feel like I need a timer anymore because my body now tells me, like I feel it, that I need to get up. And I see it in myself. I was recently at a conference and I was like a squirmy 8-year-old boy. Like I could not sit longer than 45 minutes. And I wasn't upset about that. I was like, look at my body. It knows what it needs. And a friend of mine texted me. She's like, I'm also at this conference and I am taking a lap and I'm actually learning and going to remember what I'm learning today. I come every year. I have never had this experience. It has changed the way that I'm taking in information and my back doesn't hurt. So bonus.
That's huge. That's fantastic. Amy.
I would say what Manoush just said is related to mine, which is the research around learning and movement, and also learning and kind of stepping away from your, just being away from your work and engaging in some other activity. And I think we've all probably had that experience where, you're in the shower, you're walking the dog, and that's when the big solution to your work problem, comes to your mind. And I just think the fact that there's research to support that and the movement helping that learning is so fascinating.
That's awesome. The Q&A is open. Unfortunately, the chat isn't, but folks, please do toss things into the Q&A as we go along. I'm going to ask one more question to Amy, and then we all ought to pop it around all over the place, which is basically back to Amy. So give us at least the story of like how from a, the managerial and leadership resistance around break taking at times can be a real issue. I know from firsthand experience. How did you what have you done to actually drive this in terms of usage in the organization and how's it worked?
Yeah, so I think the number one thing I've done with this initiative on break taking, and also, with other things I've done over the years, is really, I find that direct employee engagement is really the most effective. So, I call it like my wellness roadshow, and I basically partner with chiefs of staff, HR business partners, line of business leaders, reaching out to them directly, like, hey, would you like me to present at your town hall, at your team meeting? Are you having some kind of leadership forum that I could speak, even just for a few minutes? Because, I think that with all of the messaging that you get from your leaders, from your business unit, the wellness messages sometimes are not getting through, which is fine. I want people to be paying attention to their jobs. But so getting in front of people, I think, has just been the most effective. I go to meetings, I talk to them about breaks, I show them the tool. I get, just this week, I was talking to 1,200 employees, and the leader of that group, who, I've been talking about this for a year, and this is no knock on him because this is just how it works. He was not familiar with Breakthru and with the tool that we have for break taking. And while I was presenting it, he downloaded it to his Microsoft Teams, and he announced to the group of 1,300, almost 1,300 employees under him, hey guys, I wasn't aware of this. I just downloaded it and I'm going to try it this afternoon. And that is like priceless in terms of, how you can get employees to adopt something. So I think focusing on direct engagement, consistency, not just campaigns, like anytime we have a chance to talk about it, we do. And then kind of this grassroots, like peer-to-peer, encouraging people, tell your teams, share this with your friends, send a break to somebody, which is a functionality of this particular tool. But, those are, there's really no secret sauce, but that's kind of the way I think about it.
Can I chime in on that? So, we also saw in our clinical trial that leadership played a huge role. But what really worked was kind of what you just said, Amy, was not saying like, you must do this. It's good for productivity, because that's never going to go well, right? But this idea was like, hey, I'm joining this weird scientific experiment with public radio, and I don't know if it's going to work. Here's the science. Sounds kind of interesting. What if we try it? Sort of this inviting people in to be more experimental, because I think the culture shift is huge, right? Like, we've talked about this all the time. Like, from the minute we go to kindergarten, we are told that sitting and staring straight ahead is what productivity looks like. And so there's really, as you can read the science, you can believe the like health benefits, but to not think that people are judging you because you're not sitting typing away, that's the big thing that has to be changed. And only the people at the very top can give people like that, permission, whether it's explicit or just in like walking the walk, quite literally.
Yeah.
And this has to come to you because I think you have a great story about that. Because I would say bottoms up, tops down, the middle layer too, my direct report. Who's my manager? How do they see
Yeah.
it? It's their
No,
behavior.
absolutely. And just picking up on that, like I've been in tech for 30 years now. The hustle culture thing has been with us forever. And so it's not just the second graders being told to sit still. It's the fact that we're expected to be always on. So the Slack team, Chrissy Arnold and Christina Janzer, after I left Slack, actually did a study on this. 38% of the employees felt comfortable taking breaks. Right. It wasn't about whether or not they were doing it. It was just like, do I even feel like it's socially acceptable? Is it okay for me to do this? Because they felt the weight of the work and weight of expectations on them. And so one of the things that they did when they started rolling out their own experimentation on this was that they got leaders to role model, right? So Cal Henderson, who is the CTO at Slack at the time, stood up and said, no, stood up and ran a video and showed some of the things that he was doing that weren't just like doom scrolling on his phone. Like I take breaks because it's important. It's a good way for me to recharge. It's a good way for me to get my energy back and redrive focus. And having some of the leaders and the executives sharing what they were doing was a really big part of what drove it. The interesting thing was it still only moved the needle from like 38% to 60%. So there's just this still
Good.
cultural bias away from it that is so deeply rooted that I think it's really, really challenging.
I would also add to that I talk about explicit permission giving. Like, it's not enough. Like, I think a lot of leaders are like, well, sure, if my people, if they can manage their time, if they want to take a break or if they need to, sure. But I think what we learned also in our, like, when we first piloted this tool, for instance, and we could really get under the hood about like people's experiences, what we heard was like they really need their manager or their leader to say like, it's okay with me if you take a break, do it. It has to really be explicit, because I think that barrier, like you said, getting up to the 60% is huge. But there's still that barrier and that perception that like, I can't do this.
I
Just
think it's so funny though, like, because I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was like totally socially acceptable to be like, I'm gonna go outside and have a cigarette break.
Oh,
And
true.
it's like, so we can do this
Of
clearly,
course.
but the difference was back then is that we weren't glued on screens like we are right now. I think that is different, but still, we're like doing something good for ourselves instead of filling ourselves with poison. So it seems like maybe we can just, grab that
A little
mentality.
bit of Cal Newport's hyperactive hive mind thing, right? Which is the tools and the tech, not just the big screens that we're all staring at, but these things are with us, nonstop, 24/7. And so we've set ourselves this absurd expectation.
I think there's another side of this, which is to think about the meaning of movement breaks and break taking for people who also are on their feet all day at work. And it was the phone being brought up that just made me think of that, because some of the organizations where we have the opportunity to partner, there's really diverse workforces. There's people that are in back-to-back meetings, but there's also people that are unpacking boxes. There's people that are fixing trains. I mean, there's people doing all different kinds of work on their feet. And one of the things that we started learning in some of those environments is people were turning to their phone as their own break. And in fact, this was an issue that predated COVID even. We started working on this problem because people were taking digital breaks during even physical work days. And when you're in information overload in your workplace, and then you're in scroll overload in your private digital space, your cognition has not had any break at all. It's the same pace. And so that side of it, I think, is a really important thing to consider. We've covered a lot of the things that I know that we wanted to touch on here, but I really wanted to surface the question because we've all experienced it in our own ecosystems in different ways and also in our own lives. Why is it hard to take a break? Like literally, why is it hard to take a break? What are the cultural barriers? What are the mental barriers? Like, what is our thesis about it? Amy, I mean, you had some interesting comments about this in terms of getting people to wrap their head around it differently.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's so many reasons why it's hard to take a break. And I think we talked about Manoush's comments about like the science around it was fascinating too, to me about the interoception. Is that how you say it? And how we kind of get out of touch. But I mean, I think that, productivity and performance, and then the digital life that we have. It's just such pressure on our workers, and there's still this perception that you have to be head down working. We have is my leader okay with it kind of barrier. I think intellectually there's really not a barrier. I think, I don't talk to groups, and it's just like in my previous life as a dietitian, I never told someone that vegetables were good for them and have them be like blown away by this information, right? Like, it's not that people don't know that taking a break is a good thing to do and that they need to take breaks, but it's really just the habit of like incorporating it into your day and coming up with kind of almost like systems. So that's one of the ways that I've approached it with people, is like coming up with these recovery rituals and these kind of systems in your day, to kind of force the breaks. And then maybe it does become more of a habit. So setting your timer is obvious, an easy one is setting a timer, setting a reminder, but also like planning your meetings to only be 25 minutes, not 30. And then committing to using that 5 minutes to take a break, or 50 minutes instead of an hour, getting up. We even talk to employees about how, like, proper hydration and moving is, a nice pair, right? Like if you need to be drinking water throughout the day, like get up and don't have a 40-ounce container at your desk. Use a smaller container so that you have to get up and like build those things into your day. And so I think it's just about, it's the same basic habit building, I think, advice, but just on this particular habit.
I want to add from a personal perspective. So the framing that's helped me is thinking of myself as an information athlete. So like you don't see someone, because here's what I used to do, right? I used to be like, well, if I just jam for like 5 hours, then I can leave early, then I can make dinner for the kids and I can finally relax. Like that's how I would structure it. But, that's when things start to happen where you're answering emails and you haven't even read to the end of the email. So you're asking a question that was actually in the original email, and then you're just spinning your wheels, or you're writing something and you're like, I think this is good. And you come back the next day and it's crap. So like to tell myself, like, your brain is what you do. This is the thing that you are best at. And the only way you can actually work less if you build in breaks, because you will be more efficient and the quality of your work will be improved. And so I hear a lot of people thinking like, even if I don't feel like taking a break, I know that if I do it, A, I won't hate my job, and B, I'll actually be better at my job. That has made a really big difference for me and many other people too.
That's a great point. And I've tried to get people to do some like peer-to-peer storytelling about that. Like the people who try the tool or are good at taking breaks, who feel the impact of it. I think once you do it, you feel like, oh yeah, like I really needed this. Like I am clear, I am more energized at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. All of these impacts you can really feel. So getting the people who feel that to share that with others, I think is a great strategy. The kind of peer-to-peer storytelling, because once you feel it, I think it is like a self-perpetuating, habit.
Hedonic treadmill in a good way.
Yeah. I want to use this to get at the first question in the Q&A, which is what are some effective movement options for people who have to maintain deep work focus for extended periods? And actually, the first thing I'd say is, like, even listening to Manoush, I was picking things up too, because increasingly I'm spending a lot of my time as a writer. And I know that if I don't have, for example, 2-hour blocks of time, The quality of my writing is for shit, to be blunt. Because I need like deep chunks of time where I'm going to go into something, and especially given that I'm a little ADHD, more than a little, um, that deep focus when I get into it is something that I don't want to pull out of. But I'm also counterbalancing that with I know that I get past a certain point after an hour or so of something that I'm really jamming on, it starts to get sloppy and it starts to get messy, right? So maybe I'll let myself over that 2 hour period, I'll end up writing for 90 minutes of it, but I know that I also have to step away from it at various points in time and I'll have to come back to it too. So there's no miracle that happens. In terms of effective movement options itself, for me, it is literally getting up and leaving this room. It's getting up and moving someplace else. It's sometimes going downstairs and grabbing a snack and saying hello to my spouse. It's sometimes going off into the backyard, but it's walking away from the devices. I don't know about
Uh,
y'all.
yeah, so I want to just answer in the chat real quick. So Breakthru is Melissa's company and the tools that she uses, and my book is Body Electric. And I would say there's two different sort of ethos is packed into these. So for me, we did not specify in our clinical trial with 20,000 people whether or not people had to get off their screens or not, because that was one of the things we wanted to see what they did. And there were some people who were like, I cannot walk away for 5 minutes, so I'm gonna do the Zoom and shuffle, is what I like to call it, which is literally like stepping back and forth. You can also do little squats. You can also do heel raises, super easy. But what we heard from people was that they started using these breaks as permission to get off their screens, and that gave them time to reflect on like, okay, wait, do I really need to answer that email today? You know what? Tomorrow. They can wait. And just sort of prioritize and really make a strategy for their day when they got back to their desks. And I would say the other thing we found is that people who got out into nature during their breaks saw added benefits, which of course has been shown in the science too. But Melissa, you have a different take on it, so I'll hand it over to
Yeah.
you.
Nothing to counter anything you just said. Breakthru firmly believes if you can, as Amy says, get outside and touch grass, do it. If you can go for a long walk, do it. Everything you just said about um, free movement and especially movement outdoors is true. What we were seeing in our research and is held to be true is there's a lot of people who could not do that. They couldn't leave their desk. They couldn't take more than 2 minutes. There was no outside to go to. They were in an office with no windows. I mean, we're in use in 72 countries in many, many different kinds of work. And I have to tell you, the biggest wake-up call in the world for me as a founder since I started this initiative has just been to really understand what's the lived experience of a lot of people at work. It does not look like my office and my workday. That said, honing in on something that people could do that they could learn from that was not focused on device but was guided and was immersive, interactive, and would put them in nature, sounds and visuals was where our science took us essentially as a compromise if we needed to leave someone on the screen. And it also gave us the chance to put in movement instruction that, I mean, part of what my goal is to be a bridge between people who have a lot of body knowledge about how we can move to focus our minds, to maintain mobility into an environment where more people have access to it. And so creating movement sequences that stem from martial arts, that stem from dance, that stem from yoga, all sort of blended together where people can work on their balance, they can work on their breathing, they can work on their stretching and mobility. That to me, that learning piece of learning new movement, which we also know can make sticking with a movement practice stickier because you feel curious and you're learning more and you feel yourself getting better. We believed that that would offset the drag that you're still in front of a machine, which I don't disagree with.
The only thing that I would add from my perspective is, prior to having this tool available to our employees, we had a lot of standing desks. And, we would try to encourage people to at least just stand up. I mean, you can stand up and just keep on, in your deep focus work if that's what you want to do. But I think the things that I do personally are very similar to what Manoush said. Like I call it the baby rock because I feel like it's because I rocked babies for so many years. And I mean, that's a long time ago now, but I kind of rock back and forth. I think the heel raises is actually, there's been some research around like blood sugar control just from like doing calf raises. And I think the trick is if your work makes you brings you to like on screen, on video meetings all the time, it can get a little tricky. But sometimes, depending on the team, I'll just say to my team, like, I'm going to stand up and sway and you're going to get dizzy watching me, so I'm turning my camera off. Like it's kind of also a team norm that you have to start to, try to get around, that being still on your camera is not, always the only way.
Spot on. I've also got the standing desk, right?
Yeah.
Hey,
Mine has,
got the full
I have to actually like squeeze these two things and pull it up. So
make it
it's
move.
also an arm workout.
But
Yeah,
to be clear, the standing desk is not the answer, only if
no,
it's an impetus to move. I want to like make
exactly.
sure
Exactly.
we're all on the same page.
Well,
Rock, so
Yes.
that you
exactly.
can rock or shuffle.
What I
Absolutely.
was going to say is I've also got like a stool, not a chair that I sit on. So it
Uh-huh.
causes me to do balance. And then I move the stool out of the way between meetings so that I'm standing. And then there's a footstool below so that I can do calf raises and stuff like that. So
Nice.
just like making sure that you've got variety in whatever it is that your setup looks like. I'm not an expert in this, but it's just the joys of over the years figuring out like, I know I've got to move if I'm stuck back to back in meetings. What am I going to do?
We also had a lot of people working from home in our study. And like some people would say, like, I've just decided to clean my house in 5 minute increments. So, like, that 5 minutes is vacuuming the downstairs. The next 5 minutes is doing the bedroom. And they're like, my house has never been so clean and I feel better. And it's like kind of amazing. Or I'll do the thing where, people leave their dirty glasses all over the house. So I'll go around and collect all the glasses. That takes about 5 minutes and that's moving. There are other extremes. I've had people be like, I bought a dog. It was the only way this was going to happen. She keeps me honest because she needs to go out. Every 2 hours, we go out for 10 minutes, and that's what's working for me. I have lots of other hacks and ideas. Some of them get a little nutty in the book if you're curious.
You do have some really good ones in there. Peter Baker asks, is there a really simple version of the book to help the majority of people understand the dangers of not moving and taking breaks? Like ultra-processed people helped him understand that processed food can have a real negative impact. I will
Mm.
say, and then I'll open it up. I used a hook that Melissa gave me in an interview for my Substack post when I interviewed her, which is the increase in mortality rate for sitting for more than 6 hours a day, which is you crank up your mortality rate for men by 17% and for women by 34% if you're sitting still and not moving for that extended a period of time. So that gets people's attention. Nobody wants that.
The one that I get people to gasp at is where, and it's not a fun one, it's that the average 19-year-old generally moves about as much as the average 62-year-old now. And right, that's crazy. Type 2 diabetes has doubled in young people over the last 20 years. And that is not to say that those young people, I have a 19-year-old, that they're lazy. The point is that like, yeah, they're doing their homework on screens. They bring the Chromebook to class. They are on their phones texting with their friends because that's how the world works. And so what I have found is that sort of creating a mantra for yourself that works for you, between classes, instead of scrolling on TikTok, I'll do one lap around the quad so that I get to class and I can actually concentrate. To me, that's like what I'll do, why I'll do it, and the benefit. And so I try to say that to myself too. After this Zoom call, I'm going to go for a walk around the block so that I can get to my next meeting and actually focus, and so that I can think about what we've discussed here and actually make sense of it, process it, and think about, what do I want to do next time differently? How can I think about this information that we all shared and push it forward?
I know we wanted to talk about movement sort of in the advent of the AI era in the
Mm.
workplace, for sure. But just to add to what was just said here, I mean, for me, a good hook for people is the flip side. It's the amazing sort of positivity of the design of the human body that such a short moment of movement can be so good for you, that it can turn all these systems back on, that it's so achievable. I mean, in our research, we were seeing that a lot of people stopped moving, when they didn't make the team or when their kids did make the team and they were going to watch the game instead of play the game. There were a lot of cultural norms about how you're supposed to move at what point in your lifetime.
Mm,
Also, are you even supposed to move in an office? Isn't that weird?
mm.
Why would you do that? You have a brain, not a body. But this fact that if you can educate people on short movements have such an outsized benefit that starts to feel achievable. And then it has huge benefits before and after the workday too, because you just feel more in your body for the rest of the day. We didn't talk about that, should we? About people feeling shy moving in the office? I mean, Amy, did you feel like that came up? And if so,
Yeah.
how do you deal with that?
Yeah, that is a tricky one. That is a tricky one. I think there's definitely a sensitivity in our kind of open office floor workspaces where everyone can see everybody else. I have a colleague who sits a few seats down from me in our Manhattan office. And every day at noon, she does her breakthrough and she stands up and she's like, who's with me? And I think that that's amazing. And sometimes people will do it. But I think what my messaging has been, I've tried to be really honest and transparent with people, and I just tell people, like, if you don't feel comfortable standing at your desk and moving in this way, like, fine, we have offices on the sides of our hallways where you can go to make a private phone call, go in there, or just simply walk around, just acknowledging that there might be a sensitivity for people, I think also lets people say, oh, okay, then maybe I'll find my own way. It's not just like this is the perfect break and it's the only thing that we can do. So to me, it's just been kind of bringing that up as a point, like you might feel silly at first, but then you're going to feel really great because it feels good in your body to do this and in your mind. So I think just like kind of looking at that straight on, and some people will accept it and some people won't feel comfortable. But I do think still the cultural norm of taking breaks is really what you want to build.
Spot. There's a question that was in the Q&A about why when people are doing workplace ergonomics studies of offices, why are breaks and movement not considered part of it? Melissa, I don't know if you've got a take on that one.
It's a really good question, and I hope they will be in the future. One thing I would say is just ergonomics as a study and an area of impact on the workday. We tend to see more in the lives of people who are working on their feet in high
Mhm.
safety, conditions, and we all could learn a lot from that, right? It's totally normal if you work in a factory or if you work in a train yard to have a stretch break in the morning for safety reasons. And so it's interesting because that same sort of philosophy could make it more normal to move in an office environment in a workday, but we haven't created translations between those different sort of realms.
I've designed my fantasy office in my mind. Shall I tell you what it is?
Please
You
do.
have like
Yes.
the offices in the inside or however, wherever people sit, and then there's like a track surrounding it so that you
Yes.
could just be like, hey, can I talk to you real quick? And then you just do one lap together. Wouldn't that be so great? And then if
Great
it's
idea.
raining outside, it's fine. And it's just totally normal. People are coming off the track onto the track, and it's all no big deal. But I do want to catch myself and mention that if walking is not an option, if legs are not working for you, we heard from other people there is research into how to using your arms and circling your arms has excellent benefits. We had a woman who was a lawyer in a wheelchair who had real lymphatic system problems, and she used a vibration plate just to move them for her. So that was an interesting sort of hack too. So I just want to also make sure we mention that.
It's a good
Anything on the
point.
AI front before we
Yeah,
take
for sure. I
that?
was gonna tie back to your quality or your safety and security concern, right? Like you're seeing this in frontline workplaces because there are like in factories or with nurses, there are real concerns about what happens. The same issues in a different way are starting to show up in AI related workplaces. So there's a study called AI Brain Fry that was in HBR a few months back. Gabriella Kellerman, who's now at BCG, was one of the authors of it, and what they talk about in that is that people who are deep users of AI that are using multiple agents simultaneously hit a tipping point, and that tipping point comes pretty quick. Like you're using three agents at the same time, and what you're getting is this cognitive overload, right? It's deeper thought than you're used to doing. There's not a lot of low-level tactical, I can check the box things. It's really stressing you. And after a certain point, what happens is, A, your desire to quit goes up. But the other problem is you start making errors, like sizable errors. So we've seen this in public now, right? We've seen the consulting firms that have put out reports with, my favorite was one the other day that was like a report on the benefits of AI that had a hallucination from AI in the report. But the bigger one this week was Starbucks in South Korea that put out a marketing campaign where AI suggested a line that actually turned out to be really, really radically culturally insensitive. So they're closing all Starbucks stores next week for an afternoon to do sensitivity training. But it was one of those things where like the AI gave it to somebody, it went into the content went to the managers for approval, nobody bothered looking through it, and it went out into the public. Now, I'm not saying that people taking a break is going to necessarily solve that, but it certainly is going to give you more circuit breakers so that you can step back and think about it. So the deeper we go into the uses of AI, the more that we're going to realize like we don't operate at machine speed. We think we operate at machine speed, but we do not. And there's no way for us to keep up with machine speed.
Yeah, and I've been bringing that topic to on my little wellness roadshow that I do to town halls and team meetings. I've been bringing this topic, especially since that HBR study came out. We jumped right on that because I think that whenever I've spoken to groups or people about that, there's like a little bit of recognition in people's eyes, like, oh yeah, I kind of feel, I feel that. And I think also one thing that's not, I don't know, remember if it's discussed in that particular article, but in addition to kind of the cognitive overload and the intensity and like kind of the higher level thinking and the kind of sustained mental throughput and all of that, there's also just like the basic like change management and the psychological and mental effects of change and uncertainty. And, in a lot of workplaces, it's like, what is AI going to do to my job? And like all these kind of really basic human things that don't even have anything to do with the speed of work and the technology itself, but just more about like our experience as people in jobs. And so all the more reason why people's stress is building, tension is building, putting them more at risk for burnout, et cetera. And so, having, recovery and rest and breaks and all of that is a real basic fundamental way that you can counteract that.
I'll add, my research partner, Keith Diaz, and I just published an op-ed in The Guardian about AI that takes sort of a more historical look, which is that every time we have introduced a new innovation or technology to increase efficiency, processing efficiency, we've actually detracted from the need to use the human body, which can be great. We have fewer fingers being chopped off in factories, right? Like, let's acknowledge there are wonderful things that happen, but then also you add escalators and drive-throughs and so on and so forth, and you get to AI, and we still have this, like, I think there's still this like peddling, this fantasy being peddled that like AI will set us free and like suddenly we'll have time to like take all the Pilates classes we want and like frolic through fields, That has never ever happened in the history of technological innovation. Will it happen this time? I mean, look, Black Swan, who knows? But like at this point, absolutely not. So if anything, I think there was a philosopher, Tobias Rees, who put it really well. He was like, we never talked about needing to get into nature before the Industrial Revolution because everybody lived in nature. You didn't have to talk about it. And I think that's where we are now when it comes to, giving ourselves time to think and move. Like an older person said to me, she's like, I think you're just telling people that they need to move their bodies. I was like, lady, that's where we are. Like, that is where we are. People need to schedule it. They need to have language around it and they need to be intentional about it because technology will crowd it out. And so, judgment, decision making, thinking, all of these things that are getting outsourced, how do we begin to put more sort of formal structures around them and integrate them into our day purposefully? It's a fascinating time.
There's a beautiful question that came in from Kimberly about experience about getting teams moving together or people moving together. Manoush, I've seen you do it in a TED Talk. And Amy, do you ever do that and if so, what's that like?
Yeah, so that's something that we definitely encourage. We're also very cognizant of the kind of being inclusive in this too, and not suggesting that everyone does have the same physical ability to like go on a walking meeting or to do something physical like that. But that is definitely one of the top tips that I give to leaders in the message channels that I have just that go to managers and leaders. One of the ideas is always like, do a meeting where you're all away from your screens and, wherever you are walking on the phone, doing something as a team. And we've had some teams, there's a particular team in Mexico. I know the leader, he happened to have a group that they were all runners. And so like they did a lot as a team, with running, and it really was such a team building, such a, the employees reported that they felt like their well-being and their, themselves as like people too were being so supported by that leader.
Also done it virtually with teams that are spread out across locations because literally just saying to everybody before we get going, everybody stand up, stretch your arms, move around, do this, do this, do this. We had a charter event last week in New York, and I
Now I want to
was
do it.
at,
Sorry, Brian.
oh,
Or not
that's all right.
sorry. Sorry, not
Sorry,
sorry.
sorry, not sorry. But I was the 11 o'clock speaker on a thing that had started at 9:15. And so what I did, the first thing I did when I got up there, I'm like, okay, there's a break after me, but you're all going to stand up right now. And made everybody stand up, put their laptops down or their phones down or whatever else and do a little bit of a stretch because it gets the blood flowing and it gets the attention going again too, right? You got to
I
find a
think
way
it
to
makes
encourage
people
it.
laugh as well, right?
It
Like you
does.
can't
It,
help
it
but
breaks the
smile. Like
tension.
it's
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, it wasn't lost on me that I was also like going to get them to take a survey next. I'm like, now that I've gotten you doing things that I tell you to do, here's the next thing I need you to do.
boring presentations. Definitely stick in a movement break. It changes the vibe and the
Spot
mood like
on.
that.
Spot on.
There's great science on that too. When we literally move and sync, even if it's with strangers, we subconsciously indicate to each other that we're willing to cooperate.
Yeah.
And your brain body maps extends to the size of the room. So you feel connected to the other movement too, which are really good things around getting people to open up and be willing to collaborate. So we love doing that. We promised everyone on this call a break. Should we call it? Should we wrap so everyone literally goes and takes part of it? Is there a question that I missed? Yes, Brian.
There's one or two I wouldn't mind since we
Yeah,
got
that's
3 minutes till then. One of
Yeah.
them is something maybe Amy and Melissa have a point on. Well-being programs and workplace well-being are often separated and siloed responsibilities in organizations. What you're talking about here requires an integrated approach, benefits and real estate, et cetera. Amy, you're
Yeah.
probably best positioned.
Yeah, I would say that's true. I mean, I think for many reasons, trying to get out of the silo is so important, right? So I mean, my approach has definitely been to partner outside. I mean, if I just stayed in my little benefits and well-being space, I don't think that much would take off. So, partnering with at the very least broader HR leadership and across teams, like partnering with the learning and development group on this AI and well-being content, making sure that their AI skill building stuff incorporates some of this language around rest and recovery and breaks. Looking across the silos and kind of intentionally reaching out and seeing where where there's a point to partner on. And then also working with the line of business leaders is really something that I just feel like has been so helpful. Getting out of HR and out of benefits altogether and really going straight to the groups doing the stuff.
Melissa, you've got to have tons of experience with this because you've worked with and talked with so many companies with Breakthru.
One of the things, I mean, we've talked throughout this whole call about in the flow of work, things becoming shared habits, things being designed for, meetings cut short, et cetera. That is what it takes to make this kind of culture shift. We can't all do it alone, right? And the irony is, I see we're tiny, but we're in a lot of conversations with very big entities. It's often the case that the silos do stay put, and Amy, you're so proactive in that way. But the truth is, if someone is barely allowed to put one email out about a new program, and they're definitely not allowed to even go talk to managers or leaders about, might this be useful to your team? Because the vision is these are individual benefits for individual people to use on their individual time, then we're all really stuck when we have this much necessity to really redesign the workday.
Yeah.
So I think we just need to keep calling it out as a problem because I watch a lot of smart leaders inside organizations stuck and not of their own doing.
One thing I'd add is that one of the conversations I have with people regularly is don't think that it's HR or workplaces or somebody else's responsibility to take care of your team. As a leader, it's your responsibility because their performance is your performance. And if they're not in a good space, then you're going to have a struggle on your hands. So don't outsource it to some other function and believe you're going to solve the problem.
trying to do that with my own family. I'm the CEO of my family. I need my dad, who never stops playing online chess. I just wrote about that today, to move, and I need my kids to go for a walk after dinner with me because we just it we got to go check on the geese in the canal, see how they're doing, and the dog comes too. So
Oh
I think
man,
it extends to intergenerational and not just at work, right? It's
I'm just
like
picturing the dog and the geese.
it's how I want to live my life. I want to feel good in my body, and I want to be joyful and thinking straight for as long as possible.
That sounds good.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly.
So there's several
Okay.
questions in the chat about where can I find a one-page resource, or where can I find out more, or where can I learn more? Maybe a good way to close this is for each of us to sort of say, where can you find out more? Where can we find out more about you, what you're doing, and what to read? And Amy, we'll start with you.
Where can you find out more about what I'm doing? Occasionally on my LinkedIn, but really, I mean, if you follow my company, MetLife, they do highlight a lot of the ways that we support well-being, employee engagement, our culture, and I think you can get some ideas there.
Fantastic. Manoush.
Oh, well, I'm all about the book. It just came out. It's called Body Electric. Yay. Thanks, guys. It has I went for the last 3 years, went through the data from the 20,000 people who did our study. I found out their best practices. There's a protocol in there. We also look at how your eyes, your ears, your sleep is affected, how to bring back this embodied intelligence. And then we do it by different life stages, kids, young people, information workers like us, and older adults, retired adults, and the sort of best practices and mindsets for them. I think I'm here because I'm hoping to launch like a movement for movement, right? Like we're all in this together.
I will say, in the addition to the plug, it's super practical and tactical. I mean, you've done there's the beat research bits, there's the storytelling bits, and then there's the chapter by chapter. Here's the summary. Here's the things you need to do. Like just really tactical, which is
And
super
buy
helpful.
one copy, take a photo of the insums, honestly, and share it with your teams. Like I get that not everybody wants to, can spend the money. And so like I'm just about like let's
Get
let's
it
let's
out
do
there.
this.
Melissa,
You can find us at breakthru.me, and it's THRU. And Rain, can you put it in the chat? And yeah, we are wanting to keep this conversation big and out in the world. So please come talk to us if this is part of your passion. Brian.
and you guys also have content on your website that actually shares
We
with
have a
you.
lot of content on our website that relates to some of these questions. Yeah.
I'm easily found on LinkedIn, and on LinkedIn, you also find a link to my Substack. You'll also find the stuff that I post from my friends at Charter, and what happens there, including some content a month or two back from my interview with Melissa that gets at all the sort of stories around her research, the work, and looking forward to getting Manoush in very soon. So
Yay. Thank you all so much for being here. It's been an honor and a joy. And thanks for spending part of your day with us.
thanks,
Take care.
everybody.
Thank
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 you.
you.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.